Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. First of all, allow me to thank Director of Foreign Affairs Office, Mr. Juan de Dios Cingüengui, as well as his colleague, Julian Guillo, for making this participation possible. It is a very big honor for me to address you at the ICAP workshop, and I will do my best to give you a notion of the topic on how to advance parliamentary capacities. Now, the contents of my presentation will be, I will begin with an introduction in order to frame the topic. Then I will start by presenting the Parliamentary Research Services, following by political and by ways to advance political and scientific cooperation. I will give, following to that, some case studies, some examples of how we have achieved that in the Hellenic Parliament. And I will conclude my presentation with some general remarks that could be of use also in the case of the Argentinian Chamber of Representatives. Let's move to the first actual page of my presentation. Now, I would like you to pay a bit attention to this diagram. This diagram presents a range of technologies that will be very important in the future, not only of societies, but also for representative institutions like parliaments. Of course, this is a very complicated diagram, but I would like to read for you some technologies that will be emerging in the years to come. For instance, I would like to mention artificial intelligence. I would like to mention deep learning, machine learning, as well as blockchain. Now, all these have something in common. All these are so-called algorithms. And algorithms will be very important for the future of societies. And since parliaments are representing societies, parliaments need to understand these technologies. Members of parliament have these technologies. And I will present some proposals how parliaments can advance their capabilities to support members of parliaments, to regulate conduct with these technologies. Now, let's move to the first slide of the introduction. We are living in really exciting times. There are huge drifts in technology. Many people are talking about a third industrial revolution. These technologies that we mentioned before have some very unique characteristics. They support machine learning, so machines are able to learn themselves. Then there is an increased man-machine interaction. in many different ways. People are talking to machines, and machines understand commands, oral commands. In future, also visual commands. At the same time, technology is moving towards a decreasing human dependency from computers, meaning that we will give an instruction to computer, and a machine will be able to understand what we have communicated and act by itself. Now let's move to the next slide. It is rather obvious that this will have many advantages. Everything, the systems will be much quicker, it's much more efficient, unless we will be able to make a lot of things much simpler and much quicker and much cheaper as well. Now, we're not here to discuss about the positive aspect of these technologies. We're here mainly to discuss the concerns that are linked to these technologies. Parliaments are mainly interested into the problems that arise from the conduct with these technologies. And for instance, there will be, and there are already many issues relating to employment, but not just now. Since the first industrial revolution, there is talk about how machines will take over the jobs of humans. This is not a new discussion, as you understand, but this will go on in the future. So people, societies and parliaments should be prepared for that. Then there are lots of issues about breach of privacy. Imagine as all of our personal data will be stored in huge data centers. Parliaments and regulators in general need to regulate who will have access to this data and how this data will be used. Of course, there will be ethical implications. And now I'm just naming a couple of issues that are already on the rise. For instance, there will be killer drones or robots that will be potentially making dangerous choices to humans. How our regulators are going to deal with these? So let's move to the next slide. The real question of my presentation is, how will parliaments prepare themselves to address these very important issues, both on the societal and the economical level? And my proposal, the next slide please, is the following. I think we have to find a way to strengthen parliaments, and the strengthening that I am proposing has two major components. First of all, we have to strengthen certain units within the parliaments, units that will be able to inform parliamentarians about these choices. Now, it doesn't matter how you call these units. It doesn't matter if you call them libraries, research services, scientific services, or whatever. It doesn't matter. The important thing is that parliaments need to build or advance existing units, administrative units, to deal with these issues. Units that are comprised out of experts of many different fields: legal experts, science experts, economic experts, political experts, sociologists, and I am talking here about the whole range of sciences. This is an interdisciplinary topic, and parliaments need to be informed on a whole range of aspects regarding these issues. At the same time, it should be for everybody evident that the parliament alone will not be able to tackle these issues. We are talking here about parliamentary cooperation. Parliaments should be able, should need to cooperate in order altogether to assist themselves to jointly tackle these challenges. This is a whole different talk in regard to the normal discourse about parliamentary diplomacy. What I'm talking about is to advance parliamentary diplomacy, scientific networking, and as I will show you in the next slides, I believe this is a very important aspect of parliamentary cooperation. Let's move to the next slide, please. Now, I'm talking, of course, about parliamentation. Please note the following. In most countries of the world, parliaments are very traditional institutions. Parliaments are relying on tradition. This, in many instances, prohibits parliaments to address such technological issues. This is a very important thing, though. Otherwise, we will have to deal with a decoupling between digital society and traditional parliaments on the other side. And believe me, parliamentarians do not want this to happen, because if you have in the future a distance between what is going on in society and the traditional parliament, this will be sensed by the citizens, and this will create an additional problem into tackling these issues. So the only way out of this is to help parliaments as soon as possible to include technology debate into their agenda. And parliamentary units, I call them parliamentary research services, but you can call them whatever you like, need to play an important role into assisting the parliaments develop these debates. But what are these research services? Let's move to the next slide and try to frame the notion of a research service. Parliamentary research services are already existing in most parliaments in the world. Now they have, of course, as we said, different names. And with the decades of operation, they managed to accumulate really vast experience into dealing with both procedural and technical aspects in the operation of parliaments. As we previously said, there is a necessity for parliamentary evolution. In my eyes, what needs to be done is to strengthen these institutions within the parliaments in order, again, as a follow-up, to strengthen administrative capacity of parliaments, and by that, the role of the parliament in the digital society. Of course, let's move to the next slide, please. Of course, parliaments are not alone there. The IPU, the Interparliamentary Union, just a year ago has brought a very important document about the development of parliamentary research services. It has publicized guidelines on how to create parliamentary research services and how to make them very effective. I have on the right of this slide, I have codified 13 steps into creating effective research services, and these are separated into 5 different phases. I am not going to go through all these steps. There are several publications dealing with that. What I wanted to point out is that parliaments have assistance, if they are in need of such, into developing these services. Now, what will be the role of parliamentary research services is presented in the next slide. In my opinion, there should be a project management role to these services. These services should have the necessary experts in order to manage the projects, the parliamentary projects that will be needed to acquire the necessary expertise. These services will have to have an aggressive approach, and they will need to function as in-house consultants. Now watch that. There is an increased approach in international parliamentary development that parliaments are buying very expensive outside consultancy services. I do not believe that this is necessary. Of course, to a certain extent, because we don't forget these are highly specialized technologies. The parliamentary experts will need to consult external experts. But as I already said, in most parliaments, there is sufficient expertise in-house. These will need to be managed carefully and whenever necessary, acquire from the private sector some consultants in order to do the job. In addition, using parliamentary cooperation facilities, Parliament should be able to cooperate in order to exchange necessary expertise. The next slide talks about evolving technologies. Now, of course, all technologies that we have already mentioned, artificial intelligence, man-machine interaction, and more. These are not all are ripe enough, mature enough in order to be regulated. I am not talking here about over-regulation, to immediately start regulating human contact with these technologies. Not at all. What I'm talking about is to prepare ourselves as parliaments for addressing these issues now, because when a certain threshold is being achieved, parliaments will be overburdened, and then time will not be enough. So, in order to summarize it here, the parliamentary research services that will have to be built or strengthened will need to be able to prepare the parliaments to adopt technologies from the one side and to prepare regulations that will be needed in order to address these issues in the future. But please let me ask you one question. Yes, but these issues, regulation, is normally not in the hand of the parliament. And to a certain extent, I will give you right. Normally, up to 90%, there's the famous 90-10 rule. Regulations are being introduced by governments. But here, parliaments are presented with an excellent opportunity to counterbalance governmental superiority. In my eyes, parliaments have the power and have the opportunity to look governments in the eye and be ahead in the regulation, or at least the debate for regulating these technological fields. And here I would like to continue with a case study of my parliament, of how our research service, our parliamentary research service, operates. This is shown in the next slide. As you see, the main services that our scientific service, as we call it, has are four. First, we report on legal issues, and we make legal reports to incoming. We document parliamentary activity. Third, function as in-house consultancies, as we said. Fourth, we offer Parliament. And this is what I'm talking about. To assist other parliaments to go to other parliaments via several facilities and projects. Here in Europe, for instance, we have twinning projects, we have bilateral projects, and we have the so-called Europaid projects from the European Union. Yes. 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 I'm talking, a very important point is the technical assistance point. And I'm talking about technical assistance in order to introduce you to the next slide, which deal with parliamentary cooperation and cooperation with other stakeholders. So let's move to the next slide. Over the last 5 years, the Greek Parliament has participated to 5 research projects with partners from 11 countries. And this is the map of Europe, and you see that there is a broad distribution of the partners. Now, please note that I am not talking about only parliamentary institutions. Let's move to the next slide. I am talking here about 36 different partners from 11 different countries. And these countries are in Europe, in the European Union, are candidate countries like Serbia, for instance, candidate to the European Union, and countries like Israel. The cooperation for the programs that I'm going to present in next were with institutions from 6 different sectors. I am talking about parliamentary cooperation and cooperation with universities, research institutes, private companies, media, and non-governmental organizations. In particular, we have, as regards to the parliaments, for these 5 projects, we have cooperated very closely with the Austrian Parliament and the Lithuanian Parliament. The next slide shows a few remarks regarding this cooperation. As we discussed earlier, parliaments and governments are not always compatible to cooperate in such issues. In particular, and I am sure that you have made similar experience, when it comes to parliamentary diplomacy, governments are not very happy because they see such issues of soft diplomacy with in a very unfriendly way sometimes. This is why Parliament should inform the governments of what they do. But at the same time, it would counterbalance superiority of government technology sectors. And the way to do that can only be done by strengthening the research capacity of the Parliament. And for the next few minutes, allow me to present you a few examples of very innovative concepts that the Greek Parliament has worked on in order to demonstrate to you that what I am talking about is not just science fiction. It's something that can be actually done. We have been doing that since at least 6 to 7 years, and we are extremely effective and successful into this. Let's move to the next slide. One technological aspect that we promote is digitalization and archiving. Now, many parliaments use different ways to digitize their content and archive it. We are talking here about open data. It doesn't matter if you capture your content, which might be parliamentary debates or laws or reporting or parliamentary questions. If you don't make it accessible to all public stakeholders, citizens, non-governmental organizations, private companies, researchers, academia, it doesn't matter. If you don't make it accessible to the public, it's just like you don't have it. And we are trying here, please proceed to the next slide, to design and to use really innovative and modern tools in order to capture our content, digitize it if it's not already, and present it to the wider audience. Technologies, but this is a wide people will be necessary to be able to program. Achieve these goals. Am I understood? Is that okay? Is it? Okay. Yes, I'm having a few more minutes, so yes, I can hear you perfectly. I can hear you very well. In the next couple of minutes until we reach our threshold, let me show you a couple of programs that we accomplished. For instance, and in the next slide, there is the Lexis program that we have accomplished together with the Austrian Parliament and the Lithuanian Parliament. And here we have modeled electronically the legislative workflow in the Parliament. So we were able to offer a web platform for public debates on some drafts. It's a pilot program, but we were successful. This program is Positive Space. Now, Positive Spaces is of particular importance because from Facebook, from Blogger, and other Web 2 instruments, and analyze the content and offer to policymakers very structured information about how society is thinking about draft legislation in real time. A third program is called Nomad, and this builds upon the positive spaces and previous spaces in order to assist the policymaker in the decision-making process. So Nomad created a virtual platform for content search, categorization of the results, and visualization of results, for instance, for the discussion of legislation. Let's move now to the final slide, which is about conclusions. What I have tried to communicate to you, and hopefully I was successful in that, is that international tensions and emerging technologies will pose lots of pressure in national parliaments. Now, if parliaments continue to use the traditional approach, they will have problems to tackle these issues effectively. This is why internal units, I call them parliamentary research services, will need to be developed in order to assist parliaments into dealing with these issues, to assist members of parliaments in making informed decisions on how to regulate these issues. And my proposal, and in the sources of this presentation, you will find also a detailed paper on these. My proposal calls for the strengthening of parliamentary research services. My proposal calls for intensified parliamentary cooperation as a different or as a parliamentary diplomacy, and my use the existing capacities and expertise of international organizations like the United Nations and the Interparliamentary Union. And by saying that, I would like to thank you for your attention, and I hope that I will be able to answer your questions.